Hello everyone. I hope that all of you are doing well wherever you are. And I thought of starting to share some of my views that might be useful during this very unfortunate and problematic times. And the context of my speaking would be my professional expertise in the areas of cognitive science, as many of you may know. But I don't want to give a lecture now. What I would like to do is to connect some concepts that might be useful in comprehending some of the situations that you might be encountering in your everyday life. Those who are in such fields, they are looking at events more differently. Like, for example, let's say the epidemiologists and the doctors and economists, health workers, spiritual leaders, they're all looking at these events very differently, and politicians. So we don't have one view because our expertise never leaves us. It influences our perception and it guides our cognition. Cognition is a very general word that means how we know the world. I mean, this can be anything. But let's come to the topic. Today, in this particular video, a small video, I'm trying to address the question of social cognition. What I see around happening is that people are locked up, basically, because of various restrictions, and almost all countries have been issuing these restrictions because that's the only way out to stop the spread of this disease. Now, you need to know when you are locked up or in isolation what might go wrong, because you need to know what was normal, what was never noticed and usual to you, and how they have changed, because you never stayed 2 months or 1 month in your home. You didn't have this experience of not meeting your colleagues or your friends, although you used internet and social media even then, but now they have assumed a very different role. And I'm quite sure many of you might be even fed up that this is a realization. So social cognition has suffered because human beings have evolved to be in groups. We're primates. And that has been continuing, irrespective of some differences in cultures, like the many people who have written books on differences between Eastern and Western cultures, that Americans are more individualistic, the Chinese and other Asians are more holistic. Why is that helping? If you look around authentic videos, you will see that the trauma of isolation is similar. So those theories might not come to help. What has gone wrong, theoretically speaking, is this individual group interface, because the group has vanished now. You just find yourself. And when you find yourself, and you know for a fact that you cannot access others, even though they're there. The world is out there, but we cannot access it. We cannot tamper and play with it. So we cannot get sensory feedback, because that was helping us. So we felt part of something, and that kind of helped or fueled everyday cognition or well-beingness. So this epidemic or pandemic and its consequences leading to lockdowns in countries and individuals or families being isolated has affected social cognition. And this is going to stay. I'm not offering a recipe now or a therapy or some advice how you can, cure yourself. Maybe later. But I am beginning to address an issue that is not getting actually addressed. I have not heard uh, an intellectual or writer or anyone speaking on the cognitive effects of long lockdowns. Everybody is worried about finances, job losses, and students are worried about not being able to complete their courses, and other people are worried about businesses, factories being closed. But at the end of the day, it has a serious consequence on cognition, on well-beingness, on psychologies, on how people feel about themselves. Because 2-3 months of lockdown and then sudden opening is not going to have a miracle, because your brain already has lost some kind of social cognition during that time, and you need more time to come back. And there would be an individual difference. Everybody is not going to revert back at the same speed. So it helps understanding some concepts. And one of the concepts that today I'm addressing is social cognition. Social cognition evolved first actually in our species. I mean, primates do have social cognition, but humans have. The human brain's evolution has actually made social cognition one of its main attributes. Because that's how we diagnose even people who are dysfunctional in social life. But I'm not saying that because of lockdown, a lot of people would be dysfunctional tomorrow in social life. But as I have indicated that social cognition is a widely studied area in both neuroscience, cognitive science, psychology, neuropsychology, etc. Many studies have revealed that there are specific brain areas that kind of help us achieve social cognition. And what are the key attributes? Displaying empathy, understanding another's mental state, self-awareness with regard to the environment, because that is important for interaction. And we know more about the brain areas after the emergence of brain imaging methods like fMRI and etc. So, for example, amygdala, which has been largely implicated in emotion processing, and hypothalamus, the older limbic areas. So there are many such subcortical, smaller areas that kind of sense the environment we are in and our potential reactions towards them. Like I was seeing now that people are reacting differently because of the lack of the larger interface. That feedback mechanism that we are used to is no more. So naturally the brain areas are reacting differently in the absence of their regular input, I would say. Whether there has been systematic studies with prisoners, for example, where long-term isolation can lead to more noticed changes in the overall psychobiology of the brain and behavior. But I'm not saying that this lockdown would continue for eternity. I hope not. But then there is some point, because we know now from studies that brain training even for a month can influence executive control and certain aspects of social control, emotion regulation, just a month. So imagine 3-4 months or 5 months of restricted isolation. I'm quite sure that if those studies are correct, then we can speculate that lockdown is going to have its impact on these kinds of things in the brain, and then a lot of individuals would display. In which culture this would be more is very difficult to say, because each culture has its own civilizational background. So both the brain studies and the behavioral studies, there are many books people have written on social cognition, and they can be useful guide uh, to understand what might be happening now. Therefore, it's not just a matter of uh, epidemiological precaution or uh, government policy that we need to be in lockdown. Of course, we need to be, but that looks like the only solution now. But then I'm trying to emphasize that we need to understand the larger individual and both collective aspects of social cognition, even when things look more natural later, when people are allowed free movement. Um, so that would be obviously studied by people, and some of them are collecting data through online mediums now, and we will read these reports later. Social cognition uh, evolved earlier than our analytical, rational sense. Therefore, it's very ancient, property of the brain even. And during such kinds of mega crises like wars, and you might be reading the, the the plague that happened in Europe in 13th century, world wars. Irrespective of the casualties, social cognition had suffered, and a lot of people still, the Holocaust, they have the traumatic memories of those. The individual self and its interface with the external world is basically one aspect of social cognition, which is now missing. You can understand it through certain psychological texts. A lot of people have written books otherwise also. Even social cognition literature in primates. People who are from biological sciences, they would know. So social cognition, or I would say collective cognition or group level cognition, has suffered now. But something interesting has happened also. You will see that as if the whole country is a collection of brains, of millions of people that are thinking alike, that are feeling alike. This was never the case. It's as if one important thing is occupying their waking consciousness. So this is another dimension of social cognition. While I might be referring to social cognition as a collection of people that are having interfaces, everyday life, exchanges of ideas, and that has stopped. But now we see another aspect of it, when everybody is locked up and everybody is watching these visuals and worried about their futures. They're actually thinking the same thing. So it's as if the whole collection of people on this earth right now, they have one focus, one idea is occupying them. This was not the case before, because we saw individual opinions a lot more before. I mean, now still we have individual opinions, but then the whole talk is on one thing. So as if you are part of a large collection of people who are thinking alike, and everybody is trying to basically think how this pandemic will go, how they can come back. So that's one thought. So social cognition, while has helped us becoming the smartest of the primates and achieving all these various things, I mean, our sense of self, morality, empathy, concerns for the environment, they're all part of social cognition. This has little to do with the material world actually, because the material world might might change. But I'm talking about the the psychological dimension of social cognition that uh, Homo sapiens have evolved, and this is our biggest strength, particularly in these times when uncertainty and unclarity is everywhere. Unfortunately, the experts and the opinions right now on television, you know, television is all about the numbers of people and death and the government efficiencies, non-efficiency of governments, and all kinds of things. But there has to be some kind of. I'm not talking about the usual psychological counseling. Many universities, they've started some. That probably, you've always had that. But this is something different that is happening now because everybody is thinking about the same thing, and everybody doesn't know what to say because the channel is missing. It's as if you don't see a person for 2-3 months, but then you don't feel like talking to them using this mediums. So now we know the very restrictive qualities of these mediums because they're not helping actually. So it's a good time to evaluate some of the things that we have highlighted before. What social media can do, what this can do, what that can do. All their restrictions are now clear. We need social cognition of the type, of the very ancient type, that actually is what we need. I don't want to make it. I just have introduced a concept, and people who are more interested, I cannot cite literature here. That's not my aim. Though there are many things, and I might have written and spoken before more professionally. I'm quite sure we will survive this, and probably it might be stronger, or another dimension will evolve. Yesterday, somebody was commenting that after we are through the coronavirus pandemic, our individual collective consciousness is not going to be the same. It's going to change us. I'm not talking of changes that countries will face economically, but at the level of the human mind, the way they have thought about themselves and the way they will think about themselves is going to change, because it has also brought in more collective empathy than before among countries, neighborhoods, people, families. So social cognition is going to change, but we now have to bank on what we already have accumulated. I'm talking about a kind of a collective cognitive reserve of social cognition of everybody that is on the earth now. So that reserve is helping us. There is a concept in cognitive science called cognitive reserve. It's basically like storing your mental energies through everyday practice so that you can use it up later when you need it, because we now need it more. When the world has kind of paused or its activities are on hold, and uncertainty continuing along with it. So social cognition is studied academically in multiple disciplines, and I made a point that a theory of mind is a linked concept to that. How you view yourself and other human beings, or even other animals, or trees, or there could be anything. Social cognition is that. So there should be some more discussions or more references to the cognitive consequences of lockdowns, rather than just economic or health, because social cognition is part of health. And we will see more cases of psychological impairments coming along, even those who didn't have the disease, because they have gone through a different experience. Like in Italy, they've seen, or in America now, they're seeing massive number of deaths that they never saw before in their neighborhoods. So this is not going to be easy for anyone just to forget. So I will be very happy, maybe in another uh, uh, small talk, I would like to get a bit more deeper into how you can actually cultivate some habits to reinforce and maintain your usual self during these difficult times, because that might help others who need it uh, in these difficult times. So I'm putting this in you know, kind of a YouTube channel, and if you feel like commenting or writing something, and then you can, of course, you are most welcome. I would like to respond. Um, and then we can carry on from there. Thank you very much. And like everybody the, would be saying these days, that stay safe, but I would add, stay cognitively healthy. The usual food and exercise and this, and consume less uh, distracting stuff from the media, because that could be having another big, effect. Because in the absence of the real world, its images can be more damaging, because you are not seeing the real world, or you are not interacting with real people because you are locked up. So maybe some other episode I would talk about some potential remedies. So thank you very much.